Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. I've heard the story of Pocahontas many times, but until recently I had not heard about a young man who played an important part in her story before becoming one of the first English settlers on Virginia's eastern shore. Thomas Savage was just 13 when he sailed from England in 1607 for the Jamestown colony with Captain Christopher Newport. Some accounts suggest that Thomas was passed off as the son of King James I. Others represented him as Captain Newport's son. There is actually no record of where Thomas came from or who his parents actually were. In those days, children were often indentured by that early age. Young people without any prospects could go to county fairs to look for work and sign service contracts for a year or longer. Those wanting to emigrate to the New World usually signed up for a 7-year stint to work off their passage. Thomas started out his journey expecting to be a laborer in the new colony. But the captain recognized his intelligence and presumably an amiable and thoughtful personality. Once they arrived at Jamestown, Virginia, Captain Newport joined Captain John Smith on a trade mission with the local native tribes. Thomas Savage was given, along with other gifts, to Chief Powhatan, who reciprocated with a bushel bag of beans and his own young servant, Namantak. Apparently, this type of exchange had become a common practice. The boys were to be taught their host's language so they could serve as interpreters and spies. Imagine the conversation that must have taken place when Captain Newport talked Thomas into this job. Maybe he thought it would be a great adventure. Maybe he hoped it would be easier work than cutting down trees and plowing fields. Thomas turned out to be well suited to the task before him. Powhatan himself developed great affection for Thomas and took a special interest in him. He became quite adept at his new language and before long was in great demand whenever there were negotiations between the colonists and the local tribes. When the famous Princess Pocahontas was ransomed by the English in 1613, it was 19-year-old Thomas Savage who served as interpreter to her brothers. Captain John Smith credited him as indispensable in the talks that brought an end to the First Anglo-Powhatan War and allowed the marriage of Pocahontas to John Rolfe. Thomas's life was not without its trials. Some of Powhatan's family did not appreciate this interloper. To avoid growing danger, Thomas left the tribe to return to Jamestown. Unfortunately, once there, he was never really seen as fully English or fully trustworthy. But his skill as an interpreter kept him busy nonetheless. If you've just joined us, you're listening to the Delmarva Almanac. I'm Dana Kester McCabe, and this is the story of Thomas Savage, who was probably the first permanent English settler here on Delmarva. Before long, Thomas was sent on trade missions throughout the region. One such trip brought him to what is now the eastern shore of Virginia. Life for the native people here on Delmarva, particularly down on its southernmost tip, was considerably better than that of their counterparts across the Chesapeake and Jamestown. Farming was easier here, and there was more than enough small game and fishing even when there was a harsh winter or dry growing season. Surplus food stores were traded to the Jamestown settlers for metal tools and trinkets. Thomas facilitated several exchanges with Deb-Devon, the emperor of the eastern shore, who was also known as the Laughing King of the Accomacs and the Nussawadocks. Trade was very profitable for Deb-Devon, and he, like Powhatan, became good friends with Thomas Savage as a result. The Laughing King's affection was so great that he gave Thomas a large tract of land in Northampton County, which is still known as Savage's Neck. Deb-Devon had a reputation for being easygoing and for valuing his relationship with the English colonists. In 1622, relationships across the bay, however, were not so good. Powhatan's successor, Opechancanough, was plotting an attack on Jamestown. He sent word to Deb-Devon that he wanted him to send certain poisonous plants that grew here on the eastern shore to use against the settlement. Instead, Deb-Devon warned Thomas, who warned the other colonists of an imminent threat. Jamestown Governor Sir Francis Wyatt ignored this, and sadly, on March 22, 1622, Opechancanough led the slaughter of over 300 people in Jamestown, initiating a war that lasted a decade. Thomas's interpreting services were in even higher demand for military purposes. Soon, various English leaders were vying to have Thomas work exclusively for them. When Thomas declined a request made by Virginia Governor George Yeardley's aide, Captain William Epps, he was convicted of a trumped-up charge of slander. His sentence was to work exclusively for Yeardley and Epps for a minimum of 5 years. Thomas was made the official translator for the Accomack region, but was forbidden to even speak with the native peoples there, except when following the governor's instructions. All the work Thomas did for them, and even prior to this, was done out of his obligation of servitude. He was never paid. By 1627, Governor Yeardley had died, and Captain Epps departed permanently for the West Indies, releasing Thomas from his bonds. Now, at the age of 33, he and his wife were free to make a life together on colonial Virginia's eastern shore. 4 years earlier, Thomas had married an English girl named Hannah. She must have been a remarkable young woman. She had come to the colony by herself, having paid for her own passage. In those days, it was highly unusual for any female to have the resources and autonomy to undertake such an adventure. It's no wonder that two such unique people would find each other. They had one son named John. Sadly, Thomas did not live to see the age of 40. The accounts that I have found do not say what happened to him, just that he was dead by September 1633. It was not unusual at that time for people to live shorter lives, since there was a scarcity of reliable medicine available. He may have simply gotten sick or had an accident. Just the same, he had accomplished a great deal for someone so young. He had served his community with his invaluable translating skills. And Thomas Savage turned a life of hardship into a prosperous adventure. He is believed to have been the first permanent English settler on Virginia's eastern shore, and therefore one of Delmarva's first American dreamers. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, visit our website, delmarvaalmanac.com/history. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. Be sure to follow us on Facebook or Twitter, and next week join us to learn more about our local culture and get connected to our natural wonders. If you'd like to become an underwriter for this program, visit delmarvaalmanac.com/support. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and underwriters eatdrinkbuyart.com for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.